session for the town of Austining. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we're going to go right into our work session. The first item on our work session was a presentation by the Clerk's Department, and Mary Ann Roberts is a little under the weather, so we're going to postpone that until our next work session, which will be 2 weeks from now. Our next item on the agenda, we're moving along quite quickly. Our next item on the agenda is a presentation on Sunshine, it should say Sunshine Home expansion plan. So,
good evening, Madam Supervisor, members of the board. My name is Mark Weingarten. I'm a partner in the law firm of Del Bello, Dinellen, Weingarten, Wise, and Wiedeker, and it's my pleasure to be here this evening representing the Sunshine Children's Home. I'm joined this evening by the proprietor of Sunshine, who's in the back row there, Ari Friedman. And first and foremost, on behalf of Ari and all the children, we thank you for allowing us to come here and make this presentation. The idea tonight is to inform you of what is going on with the application for the expansion of the Sunshine Children's Home, which is currently underway before the Zoning Board of Appeals in the town of Newcastle, and then to talk to you briefly a little bit about the section of which is within your jurisdiction having to do with the sewer and our request for an ability to expand the sewer capacity to the children's home. So just a little bit of brief background on it. This has been a nursing home rehab center, the facility that's located on 33 acres in the town of Newcastle, on the border of the town of Austining, for many decades. Back in 2008, it was then under the care of St. Mary's. It was under the name that it was running, and Ari Friedman, who has the unfortunate instance where his children were going through the process of needing to have a place to live, 2 of his children. They were in the home. The home was going out of business. Ari wasn't going to let that happen, and he went out and he used his personal funds, and he has invested millions of dollars into the home. He purchased it in 2009, and there has been a tremendous effort on behalf of that to bring it up to what is now a 5-star rated, one of the only one of its kind in the state of New York. I know some of you have been to the home. We are tremendously proud, as is the entire staff, of the work that they do there. It is currently of 54 beds. It treats the sickest of the sick of children. Many of them, unfortunately, do not make it. There are, if you visit our facility, you will notice that there is a pond there that's a memorial pond for the number of children that have been in that home that have not made it, and they all have rocks there with their names, and their parents come and they visit. And it's a place for them, and they come back, and they continue to come back because of the special staff that they have. I know that many of you have met them. It's not necessary for us to go into all of the things that they do, but suffice it to say, these are children that many of them are on oxygen, many of them are on feeding tubes. That's what's there. But what has been created there, rather than a hospital, is a home. And they have a place to live, and it's beautiful, and it's clean, and they're educated there to the extent that they can be educated, and they have a full educational program, and all of it's available. And if any of you want any more information with respect to the home, feel free to contact me, to contact Ari. We'd be happy to give you a site visit to take you through all of the particulars. We really have a particularly wonderful and devoted staff, and we're very proud of what happens there. But on to what we are here to talk to you about and what we've been talking to Newcastle about. We have a 54-bed facility. It is on 33 acres. It's a bucolic place. It's next door to your town park, as you're well aware. When we were going about it, what Ari said is you have a very small facility there now. He took over an existing facility. It's about 18,000 feet currently that's there. And what happened is it's just too small. You have 3 kids in a room. You have very few places where rooms have to triple and quadruple for various uses. It's a classroom, it's a place for rehab, it's various things. They needed more space. Ari contacted the state of New York and said, I want to make the facility bigger. These kids need a more beautiful, a better place. Actually, with no thought of expanding the number of beds in the facility. The state came back to Sunshine and said to them, we need a place for people. Sunshine itself, at that time, and still, has over 60 families on its waiting list. Right now, over 72 families in the state of New York are housing their children outside the state of New York because there's no place for them in the state. That is a tremendous burden on the families. They can't visit their kids every day, or once a week, or even once every couple of weeks if they're out of town, if they're in Pennsylvania, or if they're elsewhere. The state came to them and suggested that Ari come forward with a proposal to make it larger, which he did, and they went through a CON process. And the CON process is one that takes months, more than I think maybe close to 2 years, and it's called a Certificate of Need, and the Certificate of Need is overseen by the New York State Department of Health. And the New York State Department of Health, after that entire process they went through, which significant amounts of documentation on needs, significant documentation on the types of care, the types of children, the waiting list, et cetera. The same type of thing if you wanted to build a hospital, for example. It's the same process that you would go through. The state approved a 122-bed facility. And they said, you have to go get your local approvals, but that's what we in New York State would like to see at this facility. So Ari then went out and put a team together to go get local approvals in Newcastle, which is the jurisdiction there. Just so to give you a little bit of background, but not, and I'll be happy to answer questions with more detail if you'd like them. In Newcastle, this again was an existing use as a nursing home. There were some changes in the zoning law, but suffice it to say, a nursing home is a permitted use in the zone, and always has been. Nothing changes. You are allowed to have this. Some people would tell you that you need a rezoning. We don't need a rezoning. There are two things that we're requesting. There's a special permit. Talk louder.
No.
Oh, sorry. There are two things that we are requesting in Newcastle. There is a special permit, and the special permit that we have needs to be amended. One of the reasons that we have to amend the special permit is a lot of the things are outdated because there's been laws that have been passed since the initial special permit was granted, and there are some various things that we've requested. We're also, and the Zoning Board of Appeals, very interestingly, in Newcastle under their code, has jurisdiction over that. In addition, we need two variances. The variances are, under the current plan, we're allowed to have a nursing home. We're also allowed to have 83 beds. That's 29 more than we have now, and we are allowed to have 83 beds as of right. There would be no need for a variance if we went in for a request of 83. We have asked for a variance to not just go to 83, but to go to the 122 that New York State has approved. So that's one variance that's before the Zoning Board of Appeals. The second one has to do with the technical detail that after the nursing home was up and operating, et cetera, for many, many years, they passed a law really having nothing to do with our facility. In our opinion, it had to do with some other proposals that were in the town. But it is the law, and there is a requirement that nursing homes be on a state or county road, and that they have access to a state or county road. We do not have frontage on a state or county road. We're allowed to operate the facility we're at. And the legal technicality of that then is if you want to expand your facility and go back and get a new approval, you have to have frontage on a state or county road. And we have asked the Zoning Board of Appeals to vary that and to give us a variance and say, you're operating there already, you belong there already, we know that you belong there, and we're not concerned with it. So those are the requests, the legal requests that are before the town of Newcastle. Go ahead.
You just said the first one was again, I'm sorry.
The going from 83 to 122 beds.
Is there something before that I
No,
missed?
just we have a special permit, and we've asked to amend the special permit because we're going in. But the two variances. So the underlying request, the overall request, is to amend the special permit, and then there's the two variances that we are requesting, and that is the issues that are before the Zoning Board of Appeals. As part of this process, the Zoning Board of Appeals became lead agency in the environmental review process. And like any other approval that would come before you or any other board, there has to be a lead agency under the State Environmental Quality Review Act to conduct the environmental review. And that has been ongoing before the Zoning Board of Appeals. Just not to bore you with all sorts of details, there are some other small issues that are before the planning board. There is if as and when the environmental review ends, there would also be a steep slopes permit that we are requesting. There's a wetlands permit that we are requesting, and there's one other. I don't have it in front of me. I don't remember it. I'll go. And no, it's not. That's not the permit that's in front of them. There's a tree removal. There's a tree removal process. I'll get into the water in a moment. So those are the requests, the special permit I mentioned. As part of the environmental review, there have essentially been 3 issues that have been identified of interest where there have been consultants that have been hired by the town, and we have put our own consultants in, and there's been a lot of back and forth. One's been the wetlands, the other's been the traffic, and the other is the water. Now, again, these are not within your jurisdiction, but I'm happy to give you some small background on it and happy to answer any other questions you'd like. As far as the wetlands are concerned, we've actually just today submitted a revised plan where we had the original lobby of the facility was in the wetlands buffer. To be able to get away from any issues, we've now moved that out of the buffer, and now the facility no longer has anything in the buffer, and we think we are fine on all of the wetlands issues. With respect to traffic, there's been numerous reports, and by the way, their own consultant has said that as well. When I say their own, meaning the town's consultant. There have been other consultants hired by opposition to this and neighbors. They have differing opinions. I'll only tell you what our opinion is and what the town's consultants' opinions are. With respect to traffic, there was a lot of discussion. There was issues mostly looking at construction traffic, because the good news that we have with respect to traffic and water and wetlands is we don't have to make anything up. We don't have to, it's just a projection. We know exactly what gets caused from 54 beds, and we'll know exactly what, you can just do the math as to what 122 beds. We know how many employees that we need. We know how many people are there. And as you can imagine with this, there's not a lot of people coming in and out other than the employees. There's some visitation. It's not a tremendous amount. And that it's a very, in fact, if you ask most of the neighbors before all this got started, they'll tell you, we didn't even know it was there. We can't even see it from the road. It's all up on the hill. It's not a very high impact kind of a use. There has been a lot of discussion with respect to the construction traffic, and we've done a lot of work with that with people on the, with our consultants. And long story short, we've agreed to things like GPS facilities on our trucks, making sure that they make a right turn out of the facility and head towards 9A so that they don't use the back roads. There's all sorts of measures that have been approved, that have been discussed with, and while we believe, and not only believe, our consultant has proven, and the consultant of the town have agreed that there is no traffic impact. There is no change to any intersection as far as level of service. There is nothing under the law as far as an impact. We're still doing a tremendous amount of work to limit the traffic impacts because we just want to be good neighbors and do it properly. And that includes spending an awful lot of money, which comes out of Mr. Friedman's pocket, which includes, by the way, any changes to that road during construction. We have to fix them. We have to pave. We have to do all sorts of things. There's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars that are spent. The last item that came up, and the most recent one that has been created some attention, is the use of water. We have currently a differing opinion. There was a report that just came out a couple of weeks ago from a water expert that was hired by the town. We think there's some flaws in it. We will go back and forth with them on that. Suffice it to say, that's something that's going to have to get worked out before the town of Newcastle. But long story short, that's one way. That has to do with the wells. We have agreed to limit the usage of our wells to not more than what we're already doing. We've already agreed to that with them and to put monitors on it. But we are also endeavoring to look into the options of municipal water. Newcastle has water for us. It would be a very expensive process to bring those pipes more than a mile and a half over to us. But if it's something that needs to get done, it may be something that we decide to pay for. There's also municipal water that's closer by that has to do with the village of Ossining, and it's a discussion we hope to have with the village of Ossining as well. So we'll be looking into various things as we go down the road. That's not an issue that has been finalized. What we are before you today, and I would turn to sewer, I would ask you, Madam Supervisor, if anyone has questions, I'm happy to do it, or I can finish and we can do it at the end. It's up to you. Okay.
No. They'll have questions, but usually you finish.
Finish? Okay. I'll turn to sewer, which is the reason for our request before you.
That was sewer, not Sue.
Yeah, you hear what you want to hear, I guess. Isn't that what they say? So suffice it to say, well, let me just give you a little background on the history, which we get from looking at the agreements. And one second. Here we go. Back in September 15 of 1993, there was an agreement that was signed by the town of Ossining. The supervisor at that town was Mr. Burton. And at that time, it was called the Friedman Institute, which was the rehab facility, which, by the way, no relation to this Mr. Friedman. And at that time, there was a request by the Friedman Institute that they wanted to have access to sewer. There was an agreement that was entered into in '93 in which they built the sewer, continued to own the sewer, but were allowed then, they built a sewer plant, and they were allowed to hook up to the town of Ossining, the sewer line that was there that came in. About 4 years later, the town approached the Friedman Institute and asked for a request and were granted a modification of the agreement. And the modification of the agreement came when the town decided it wanted to use that sewer pump station for the town park, that it needed access to sewer for the town park and some of the improvements that they were building over in the town park. The Friedman Institute agreed to that for Cedar Lane Park, and as part of that agreement, the ownership of the sewer facility, which had been the equipment which had been built for and maintained at that time by Friedman, transferred over to Ossining. And Ossining agreed to a number of things in that agreement because it was much to their benefit, and even states in the contract that in order to lower the taxes of the town residents, we are going to be doing this, and there were certain benefits that were granted to the nursing home in order to incentivize them to sell the sewer. So when Mr. Friedman, Ari Friedman, purchased this in 2009, there was an operating sewer agreement. The sewer was, the pump station is on the property of Sunshine, but it is owned by the town of Ossining, and that's the current status. We approached the town and your council earlier this year and have been negotiating and discussing an expansion of the, or an amendment to the agreement which would allow for the expansion of the facility. We paid for and reimbursed you to go out and get a consultant, and you've had a consultant and engineers that have looked at this and have said, if you are expanded to 122 beds, here's what the capacity is, here's what you need, and here are the improvements that you would need to your sewer district. And those are things that your council has available to him, and they've been worked into a potential of a letter if we would decide to be able to enter into agreement with you. So the concept of what's needed as far as if you would grant us the approval and the right to go get the sewer expansion is already determined between the engineers. So we are here today officially for the first time making a request. We are looking for an agreement with the town of Ossining that if, as, and when we get the approvals from the town of Newcastle to go forward with the expansion, we would have a right to expand the facility at the that which is currently on our property, obviously at our expense, to permit us to hook into that. Please understand that all of the other provisions of the agreement that are currently in place stay in place, which includes that nobody else in Newcastle, other than the Sunshine Children's Home, is allowed without your permission to hook into that, so to utilize that sewer station. And that, in a nutshell, is why we're here.
Yeah.
You need a,
Mr. Wexstein, hi, I'm Eric Blaha. We've met before.
It's okay. Weingarten.
I'm sorry,
Adam's a very good lawyer.
Mr. Weingarten. We've met before, and you were
And we
present.
met him too.
And you were present when I was at the site. And thank you very much for the tour, and Mr. Friedman. Thank you very much. I can not recollect many times when I've been so pleasantly surprised at a site visit for any purpose at any time. While it was troubling on some levels from a personal standpoint, it was also an enlightening experience. So I want to preface my comments today with a very sincere thank you for your interest in looking after the welfare of those children. And putting on my town councilman hat tonight to address some thoughts. I'm just something that didn't come up tonight, and unfortunately something that I didn't even think of to mention while we were talking at the site was earth moving. I don't know if you need a permit for that. I don't know if that's part of zoning, planning, site plan, special permit approval. But it is my understanding that there would be somewhere upwards of 200 cubic yards of soil brought in from outside areas. I don't know this.
This is, that's, and if you, and again, that's not related to your sewer issue, but it's related to the construction of the new facility.
But you recognize that this town board is also an interested party in the
Yes.
town of Newcastle
And-
applications?
And I'm happy to answer your question. My point is, I just wanted to mention, we're not bringing this in to create the sewer. I just wanted to separate out the issues.
Understood.
The issues are that with respect to that is one of the issues that's being studied in the environmental. The impact of that, as it sounds, there's not a problem with that from the construction standpoint. The issue has to do with the limit, with how many trucks it creates for bringing in and bringing out, and that has been studied. There's been 3 separate traffic studies that have gone back in and have been reviewed, and we're happy to share with you. We don't have today with us our traffic consultants. We have traffic consultants, we have engineers and all those people, and we'd be happy to get you any information that you would request tonight. I'm not prepared to do a presentation on that, but we are doing some things to try and help balance it. The site is a very steep site, so there's a number of things that have to occur, and those are issues that are out there, but those are also being weighed by the lead agency with respect to how to minimize those.
Are we talking about traffic or are we talking about soil? Or are you talking about soil or traffic?
Most of what has been raised, I mean, there have been engineering reports with respect to the soil. I am not aware of anybody who suggested that there's been an impact with respect to soil or what impact that would have on the soils there. Stormwater has been studied dramatically. The issue that came out with respect to the removal of and requirement of fill has mostly centered upon the discussion of trucks and coming in with the fill.
I don't know whether it's been brought up before tonight, and I appreciate that perspective, but I'm asking you here tonight about earth moving and soil.
Okay, I'm not an engineer. I couldn't answer you that
Okay,
question
so
tonight.
here's my concern. It seems to be a perfect storm here on a potential environmental impact, and I understand there's 2 different things going on here. You have your sewer issue, and then in which we are the board that has the direct say as to whether or not the sewer permit or the sewer issue will be addressed favorably or not favorably. But I'm just shifting over for the purposes of this soil discussion to potential environmental impacts, and this board's role on behalf of the citizens of the town of Ossining as an interested party in the town of Newcastle environmental review process. And it's my understanding that environmental review would include potential impacts on a reservoir system.
Mhm.
Okay, so with that backdrop, and I've heard you say you're not an engineer, and neither am I, but I do have questions about potential environmental impacts. And it really, if one of the factors was to be addressed in isolation, maybe this wouldn't even be a topic for discussion from my perspective. But I see here a potential quadruple whammy, and I've never said those 2 words in a row before in my life. So this is unusual to me, that you not only have what I consider for the scope of town work, a massive tree removal effort, combined with bringing in 200 cubic yards approximately. I came up with that number by myself. Nobody told me it, and it's probably very wrong. But a lot of earth moving, combined with the fact that I believe this property is within the watershed for the Ossining Reservoir that serves the entire community of Ossining. I don't know that that's a fact, but it's my understanding that that's true. And then on top of that, you have a steep slope issue. So all things combined, to me, suggest that this is an issue where I think my concerns are not minutia. I think they're actually significant. I'd be interested to hear somebody on behalf of your team explain what's going on with the soil and the earth moving.
We'd be happy to share that information with you, either come back or put it to you in writing. There's been numerous reports that have gone forward by experts. As I said, when we show up at the town of Newcastle, we have a dozen people with us as part of a team that's answering these questions. It's just not something that I feel expert enough to be able to answer the question.
That's fair.
It's not my expertise.
Mhm.
Got it?
For now, does somebody else have something?
Did you have?
Okay, I can go again.
Yes.
Okay.
It's all you.
Just in terms of the footprint, because I'm in favor of the expansion of the facility. I am. Okay, so I would like to see your client's home, the children's home, be expanded, because I saw the conditions there, to me, appeared to be difficult under the circumstances. There's not enough space, again, the amazing things that are being done in that facility currently. I mean, I don't want to go overboard on that. I was so impressed. So I want you to understand that this is not personal. It's not against the cause. I'm a proponent of the cause, but I have to look out for the constituents. With that said, now let's look at the footprint of the space. If you have 54 beds now at 18,000 feet, that's about 333 square feet per bed, roughly.
Mhm.
Okay. If you are talking about increasing to 122 beds, at that calculation, which I understand is insufficient under the circumstances, you'd be looking at 40,000 square feet. Okay. I think that in the same way that it's a crowded space. You have too many children per bedroom. I get that. Okay, but somewhere there's going to be efficiencies by economies of scale that by expanding the footprint, you should be able to not have to multiply, what is it?
The 40?
54. It's almost a tenfold increase in square footage that you're looking for when you're only looking for less than 3 times the number of beds. Again, I don't know exactly how this works from a construction standpoint, but it seems to jump off the page that the amount of square footage that you're looking for, which to me translates into larger footprint, it seems excessive. You provided plans, you provided drawings. Thank you for that. You showed me around, and you told me what's going to go up and what's going to go sideways. I'm just wondering, is there another mechanism by which you can shrink the footprint, either maybe even going up another story, listen, I'm not trying to recreate the project here. I'm just trying to discuss potential impacts. Some way that you don't have to increase the footprint by that dramatic amount, and also reduce the square footage. So I don't know. It's just
Let me just mention a couple of things, because some of this is just the fact that we're building onto an existing site, and you're not building in a new place and selecting a new place. Number one, we have somewhere between 25 to 30,000 feet of storage in the facility. Normally, you would put that in a basement. It wouldn't be required as part of your. It would not be required as part of your. Be calculated as part of your square footage. The reason we have so much storage is currently there are I think there's 6 facilities that we have things stored off property. We have these large beds. There are different beds that are used for different types of illnesses and different types of children, and there's sometimes they got to go in and out and figure it out. We want to have all of that equipment on property. So there's close to 25 to 30,000 feet of storage that's in the facility. So while that, you ask, what are you using this thing for? That's a big piece of it. It's bringing that, stopping to having to pay for putting things there. But more importantly, every time you need something, having to go run down to a warehouse to pick it up and bring it back, that we have it on the property. So that's a big piece. That's something that you need to calculate in when you're going through this and understand it. The second thing is, and the only thing that I can get, a couple of other things. When we put in our environmental study, and while I don't have it in front of me, I can show you that the per square foot per bed for the 122 beds is comparable to the other 2 facilities in New York State that do the same kind of work that we do. And that's what they have. The thing is that we do need a classroom. You do need classrooms. You do need rehabilitation places. You do all these things that we currently don't have or have in very limited areas. Just again to try and figure this out, to show you. Normally, you deal with this project. You say, this guy's just making it larger to make more money. He just wants to rent out more space. You get paid by New York State by how many beds you have. Now let me put this to rest, because some of that's been out there too. This is a for-profit facility. It was not created as a not-for-profit. It was purchased. Not a dollar has been taken out of this, not a dollar of profit since it's been open. He put all of this money in, and to date, the only money that has come out to pay taxes, period. And he's taking care of these kids. If he builds 122 beds in a 50,000-foot place, he gets as much money as building 122 beds in a 150,000-foot place. He is trying to build the most beautiful place that he can build for these kids at what is going to wind up being his own expense. So the answer to this question is, if the town of Newcastle comes back, and they've had these questions to us as, should we make it smaller? Do we have to have less beds? We're not going to have a choice. But this is the dream of what we want to build, and that's why we're pursuing it. So the answer is, can the town of Newcastle require us to do less? Yeah, of course they can. But we are advocating for this because we are trying to create the most beautiful place for these kids we can. And it's not a profit motive.
And just as a point of clarification, it is a for-profit corporation, right? You said something before
Yes.
about something coming out of Mr. Friedman's pocket.
Yes.
It's
In
a
other words,
corporation, right?
it's a corporation that he owns and controls, and he's the
Is he-
person who does this.
Is he the sole shareholder?
Are you the sole shareholder? The
Okay.
majority shareholder.
Right.
There's also family members, I believe.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that it? You have anything, Jim?
I just want to answer one question that you asked about maybe making the footprint smaller and going up another story.
You're going to have to get closer to that
Sorry.
mic. Sorry.
And that's one of the things that we discussed when we made the plans and we went through all this. And for myself, I didn't want to have the place feel and look like a hospital and having multi-story building going up and down with kids with elevators. I wanted to keep everybody on one story and have the outdoor spaces within the areas. So it's just a concept that I had, not to have kids on multi-stories. Where other facilities have it, and it's probably much cheaper to build because you have the same footprint going up 2 or 3 stories. I rather want to have everything on one story. And the same is with education. That's one of the things that came in last minute when the state asked for us to have separate areas for education rather than sharing it with the rehab and the other areas that we have. And that's when you look at the plans, one area was added in the back of the building like a octagon shape space, a single story only, and that's for the education. So there's 3 areas for education that was added later, and we didn't want to have it on the 2nd floor, so we have to take children up and down. It has a different feel. It takes a lot of work to get these children in and out of an elevator, so that's why the footprint is the size that it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
And on another note, you asked about the size. We have now, in addition to storage of a lot of equipment and on other locations, we do have now, on the site, different little buildings and a modular, where we used to have a 10,000 square foot building that burned down, and now we have just a 1-story that we take up and down children now for education. And all this will be incorporated into this one building.
So, and that feeds right into what I hope was going to be my last question, which is, so if you're trying to incorporate storage into this main facility, which is perfectly understandable, will you be removing or, I don't know, reducing the size of the current facilities that do act as storage? So, I mean, are you sort of going to take, do you know what I'm
I
saying?
get the question. So on the facility right now, we have a little, we have our caretaker that lives on the property. How he lives there, and there's 6-car garage there. We keep stuff in there. We keep stuff in his attic, and we keep stuff in a garage next to the administration building, which is now an administration building. And then we keep stuff off-site, like large beds and standers, and I can't even think of a lot of equipment. Summer, winter things we take off-site. Seasonal outdoor play stuff we take off-site completely. So we could.
I think what his question was, is the administration going to move into the main building, and then you won't have the administration building? So you're getting rid of some of these,
We
like,
do have a
remote
modular building,
buildings.
for an example, that we that I put in there in 2010.
Would that come out?
That's a temporary modular 5,000 square foot that would probably come out.
Okay, I think that was your question, right?
That was, thank you. Okay, thank you.
I want to say one, just, I think Councilman Blaha's last question that kind of brought Mr. Friedman up in your response about the wish list, the dream, and I think it's laudable. I think I agree that the mission of this hospital home is extremely important, and I don't think anybody denies that in any way. But I would say, I guess, as that town person who's the interested party, that while I understand the goal in many ways to try and make this, the perfect place in terms of every wish and dream we have for moving things and making space in certain ways, that it would be important, I think, in many ways to balance that with some of the concerns with what it takes to expand and what happens with environment and what happens with trees and what happens with steep slope and water and all of those things. I just think that's an important.
We fully understand that. We may wind up in that conversation with the town of Newcastle. Most of what we're talking about, though, when you talk about the size, not the number of beds, but the size of the footprint that you had raised, doesn't have much impact. There's some, but most of the impacts, the things that had been the amount of water that you use, the wetlands issue because we're not in there, the main issues that have been looked at don't get impacted by making the footprint smaller. There are some others. We haven't gone up in, when you go up in height, you have visual impact issues with neighbors that we've tried to avoid at all costs, so every time you do one thing, you do the other. And as I said, if, as and when we get through this, through the environmental, I'm sure there's going to be a conversation with the town of Newcastle over these very issues, and we'll be open to a discussion. We'll have no choice but to be open to a discussion. These are discretionary approvals above and beyond the 83 beds that are currently permitted within the zoning, and we'll have a discussion with them. We're hopeful, but when you start to cut things out, just so you understand, then it's a balancing test, You have the room that you have now. They have none. They'll have facilities now for the parents whose children are dying, and you want to have a place for them to stay overnight if they're stuck there for a week at a time, like in a hospital, and a place for them to stay. So the question is, do you move that? Do you take that out? Do you take the storage out? What do you do? And okay, we'll have those conversations if we have to.
Okay, I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for coming this evening and really giving us some good information to talk about amongst ourselves. And
I want to answer one of his questions that he had before. With this new plan that was submitted today, moving the building, moving the building away from the pond, let's call it, I think about 80 feet, that will minimize the amount of fill or the cut and fill. The cut and fill will be more even by moving it away from the pond, so we don't have to raise that area so much. So that's going to be minimized as well.
We look forward to hearing back.
so thank you. Thank you very much for coming in this evening. It's good to hear from you.
Will the board take some public comment from?
No, primarily because, this is in front of the Newcastle board. So this was for us just to learn a little bit more from their side. You're more than welcome to send us an email or something if you want to, but we do encourage you to go before the Newcastle board if you have comments.
I think everyone here is
I'm sure you have been.
actively involved in Newcastle. I just want to point out that the Newcastle ZBA may issue their determination under secret, in other words, requiring EIS or not, as early as December 21st, which is the next meeting. So we will be sending things to the town board here.
Okay.
And I encourage you as an interested agency to really
Don't worry, we're on top of everything, so we know everything that's going on. Okay, thank you very, very much. Next item on our agenda is, our poor ethics board, which is standing outside, is going to be an ethics board update. About a year or so ago, we started working on our ethics board, and we started, and we did a lot of work on it. We created an ethics board that used to be 2 members plus the attorney, which was a member of the ethics board, and we made it a 5-member ethics board with the attorney being the liaison. And we also put some strength and some teeth into the ethics board. So we're going to ask, who's going to be the spokesman tonight, Mark? Mark? So Mark Reisman is our deputy attorney, and he is the liaison to the ethics board. So first of all, I want to thank you all for all the hard work that you've done. I sit in the background sometimes. I get dropped into an email, and I sit in the background and I watch and I listen. And then when it's all done, I'll write, great. So I thank you all for all the work that you've done. And so, Mark, we're going to let you maybe give us a little recap of what, since you were, you and Stuart and Sandy were like some of the authors and stuff. So,
Yes. So, is this mic working? Can everybody hear me?
can you hear us, Matt? As long as Matt can hear us, that's the
Okay,
key.
fine.
Okay.
All right. So, Sue, I think you covered the basic changes. What we did was to make the ethics code a little bit more stringent than the state ethics code, which is, I believe, Article 18 of the General Municipal Law. So that's one of the main things. The other thing we did was to make sure in the statute, in the newly amended statute, was to give the members of the Board of Ethics each has a term. So they have 5-year terms, and each year, so I think to begin with, until we get into the full swing of everybody getting a 5-year term, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, so that each year one person's term is up, and then they get appointed, and then either they get reappointed or there's a new person appointed to the seat. And under the old law, the members of the Board of Ethics served at the pleasure of the town board, and we wanted to, not that it was a politicized position in the first place, but we wanted to make it even have less of an appearance of politicization. I don't know if I said that right. Less tied to politics by giving people a 5-year term, each person a 5-year term.
That's a word, but
Politicize.
politicization.
Politicize. I used to be able to say that, but I can't. Yes, I'm moving on. So in any event, the statute requires the Board of Ethics to promulgate their own internal set of procedures, which it has done, or we have done. I can't say we because I'm no longer, or my position is no longer on the board. I'm now a liaison, a non-voting member, which we also believed would be more proper. So anyhow, the Board of Ethics has drafted a set of internal rules and regs. It has drafted a sample complaint form to be compliant with the newly amended statute, and also a sample request for advisory opinion. Now, this group of people, and I'll just introduce them. It's Laura Whitlinger, correct? Chris Camosa, and Sue Iloski. Unfortunately, Stuart Kahan and Sandy Hirsch, who are our continuing members, could not be here this evening. In any event, these people are so diligent that in the interim, when they were sitting upstairs waiting to be called, they went through the document again, and they've made some further revisions. So to make it a little bit more easily understandable, to clear up some potential.
To the average person.
Yes, to the average person. To the non-lawyers, yes, who are now required to be on the board under the amended statute.
I think
So-
that's an important point, too. It's not all attorneys on this
Yes,
ethics board, too.
yes. I think at least one cannot be.
But we
under
have
the new
two.
statute.
Two.
Yes. All right. Well, can't win them all. So in any event, what we would like to do with the permission of the board, and I know that you all have the drafts, we would like an additional, did we say week? We would like an additional week to submit the proposed revisions
Okay.
Can we
to
ask
what
any
we've already put in
questions so
front of
that-
us.
Yeah, so everybody's gotten a chance to read it, so let's us ask the questions on top of that, and then you can talk about those in when you're talking about your revisions.
And maybe
I
you
love the
already-
fact that they do it via email too. They're all talking to each other very respectfully. It was the most respectful conversations that everybody has, so what do you have?
You may already have this, so this might be something. The first thing was in the request for an advisory opinion, speaking to having someone understand, a layperson, this definition was a little bit dense. I mean, I read it twice and I finally got it, but I think it was a little hard. So that might be one of those things, and you probably already had that. On the sworn.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The answer is yes. That's
I-
one of the, that's
I
one
got
of the
that.
things that we're clarifying.
Yeah.
Okay.
The second thing was on the sworn complaint. Number 2 says, please provide details of the alleged violation sections of the Town of Austining Code of Ethics.
Right.
Who's supposed to be filling that out? Because I would assume that a layperson would have no idea.
Well, a layperson has access to the statute, which is posted
Yep.
online.
And if you're taking this dramatic of a step, You
Most
re-
people probably, I would just state that I don't think that a lot of people would actually go online or figure out or necessarily know. They might think something is unethical, or they might know something is unethical, but they may be upset, or they may be scared, or they may not know. And I would not assume that a person in the community would necessarily know how to or to find the code of ethic that is being possibly violated.
We discussed that a little bit upstairs a few minutes ago, and my answer, and correct me, board, if you disagree, would be that it's not absolutely mandatory that a complainant cite the section of the Code of Ethics that they believe has been violated. If they do it, fine. If they cite it incorrectly, fine. What the board would really be most interested in are the allegations of fact that they claim constitute an ethics violation.
But then maybe we can just put "if known" at the end of it.
That's fine.
I think.
Is that a problem?
We just discussed over here putting a link to the website on the document for reference, so that they can do a cross-reference on the website. Do you think that would work?
I mean,
have to say,
sure.
I agree with you on the language, because even the language describing the code of ethics is challenging to understand,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, I think it's fine to say that we want that that you want that information. I just think it might be helpful if it doesn't put somebody under a pressure, because we don't know what the situation might be. And what if somebody was making an allegation against somebody, I mean, this is not, we hope this never, ever, ever, ever gets used, but we are talking about the possibilities. And so I'm just saying in that realm, maybe a link to, if you know, just something that kind of makes them feel like, if I don't know this, you don't want them not to file it because they don't know.
but you want them to understand that, again, this is not a request for the advisory opinion. We're now on the
This is a
actually
sworn
complaint.
Yes.
So we want them to know what entails being a complaint, an ethics complaint. It is not because somebody is scaring you, you call the police for that. So I think while I understand what you're saying is, if known, it can be put on, or put a link to the thing, but they should have read. If someone's going to the point of putting in a complaint against someone, they really, really should have known what the ethics code.
Well, but I could know that something is a quid pro quo and it shouldn't happen, but I might not know where in the town code that ethic is violated. I mean, you can know what is a violation in theory, or somebody should not be doing this thing. If I work for the town, I shouldn't be selling the tools of the town. I mean, I might know that that's not a good thing.
Well, I
and
think
a
what
violation, but-
and I could be wrong, but I think what they're looking for in there is that, what are you accusing them of? Theft, not of the tools for the town. And in the
Well-
ethics code, it says, what don't you do? You don't steal. You don't. So again.
If I may, I think there's a way to. I believe that number one, which says, and I'll quote it, on the complaint form, please provide a detailed statement or description of the nature of your complaint, including the facts, okay?
Right.
And
Please
it goes,
give the facts.
And it goes on. Now, paragraph 2, I think we could clear it up very easily by saying, please provide details of the allegedly, we corrected that, violated sections of the Town of Austin Code of Ethics, comma, if known.
Yeah,
And,
perfect.
and I think that clears
Simple.
up the
Okay.
problem.
And then my very last, very small, was in the procedures under 2G, where you select a chairperson. It says, the chairperson shall be selected in the order in which a person was appointed by the town board. And I just thought to myself, what if that person doesn't want to be the chairperson? Is there, I mean, unless they don't want it, and then the next person gets it. I just thought, what if there are people who don't want to be chairs of committees necessarily? Sometimes so I just thought, is there a provision by which that might not be adhered to? It's small.
Fair comment. Okay.
God bless.
2 against 1.
I just
Or
wanted you to
usually
know
the
that-
absentee people get it,
I
That's-
just wanted to know, we really read it. So now,
Sue, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I just want to state my opinion, which is that frankly, I don't think you need number 2. I think you could eliminate number 2 entirely, personally.
Are you on the general protocol?
Yeah, I'm in the sworn complaint, I'm sorry. So I think number 1 covers everything you need to have in this complaint, personally. I don't think you need people to then reference the actual code. They're giving all the details of what the nature of the complaint is. You're asking in number 1 for basically everything, including what happened, when, dates, places, etc., and any proof. So I'm not sure. I personally think that number 2 is duplicative. That's my opinion. And it may serve to be confusing to people because of that.
Well, you guys go back and discuss that.
Okay.
Did you have anything? Yeah. I know. That was a silly question. And silliness is not,
Thank you very much for all your work on this. It obviously shows you've been very, very hard at work and giving this a lot of thought, which is very important. So thank you. Just a couple of quick questions on can I ask about the procedures?
absolutely.
Okay. So as far as
Why
the
you have them.
Okay, as far as the procedures go, I just didn't understand, on your page 3, it's subsection 2 of subsection H of general protocol, Roman numeral 2. Or did I get that right? Yeah. So it's all the way on page 3, towards the top of the page. I didn't really understand what that means. Complainant will be notified of the receipt of the complaint. Otherwise, the Board of Ethics will advise the complainant that the complaint does not warrant investigation.
I'm just trying to get to the section that you're
Yeah, it's the
referring
top
to.
of page 3.
Top of page 3.
Number 2.
The Board of Ethics shall conduct
Right, but subsection 2 to that.
the complainant should be notified.
I guess it's the otherwise, right?
Sort of the otherwise. Are you saying that there's 2 things that happen in number 2? You either say to the complainant, we have it, which implies that means you're going to conduct an investigation, or it's just returned to them, or you just basically say, no, this is basically rejected. There's no substance here. Is that what number 2 says?
I understand what you're saying. I think what it should say is, and if anybody on the board disagrees with me, please say so. It should probably indicate, I think under all circumstances, the complainant should receive an acknowledgement that the complaint has been received. So that would be the first change. And then if the complaint is unfounded after an initial review, the Board of Ethics shall notify the complainant. And then once once you get through that particular stage, I think number 3 is pretty understandable.
Well, you might end up with 4 steps.
Yeah.
You might end up with 4 steps. You're going to acknowledge that you got the complaint.
Yeah, it has to be acknowledged that it
yeah.
was received. It has to be reviewed, so that's number one.
And then if it's either unfounded or founded.
Right, exactly.
So then, following on that page, you have the formal complaint review.
Yes.
I know that part of the changes that the board's going to make is to add little subsection numbers next to those paragraphs. But aside from that, or in addition to that, I believe for a formal complaint review, there should be 2 sort of additional items. One is that, in fact, there's going to be an issuance of a formal findings of fact and recommendations to the board.
Yeah, just remember that that's in the statute itself. So this is simply, these are simply the internal procedures of the board.
Right, but I think as one procedure, it should include, well, maybe I went out of order. There should be some sort of, I believe, closure of the receipt of evidence. And then from that date, a guideline, not a strict period, but a guideline of time for when a decision should be issued. Just so you have speedy justice here. You shouldn't, I don't think it should be open-ended that you can have an investigation and then 5 years later issue a report. I think there should be some guideline that, once the board determines that all the information that it needs to render a decision has been accumulated, that there should be a cutoff, and within 45 days of that time, give or take, a recommendation should be made to the town board, just for guidance. And then from there, on that date or whatever it is, then I think it should be identified that a document titled findings of fact and recommendations or whatever the language is from the statute, tie it together so that this is the report that results from this formal complaint review.
Group, any objections?
Yeah, I think those are accurate. Chris said he'd do it.
Very
Makes
good.
sense.
Oh, and just as a technicality, I just didn't recognize on the formal complaint, I didn't recognize that sort of it seems that there's room for a notarization on the sworn complaint. I'm used to seeing different text there, and I just don't know what the source of that is.
That's one of the sections that we're revising.
Okay.
Okay.
I think when we're done revising it, it'll be more
What
familiar to
everyone's
you.
used to looking at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so
Excellent.
much,
I just want-
board, for doing this.
I just want to,
I'd like to add my congratulations to the members of the Ethics Board. You've done a tremendous job and worked diligently along with us to get this thing working.
Yep.
And it's just a remarkable document. And Kim's concern, I think, regarding what
Complete one?
what's that?
Which one?
I think the section of the statute.
The sworn complaint?
Yeah, the sworn-
The ethics
Yeah,
part,
the
the
sworn
code of
complaint.
ethics one? This one? That
yeah,
one?
the number 2, yeah.
Yeah. Providing details of the alleged violated sections. I think if it's not currently going to be considered, if Kim's suggestion is that the entire thing be on
On the website itself,
Right.
like, yeah.
Exactly.
They're gonna put it on, they're gonna tell you, the whole law is on the website, yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole law is on the website, as is everything that we ever do in the town. So, you
Right.
done? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do too want to thank, I want to thank Mark Reisman, Sandy Hirsch, and Eric, and Stuart Kahan for the tremendous amount of preliminary work they did. I want to thank you all for stepping forward, along with the other people that stepped forward that were not chosen. It's pretty remarkable when we put out a call for boards in the town. It's pretty exciting to work on a board in the town. This is town-wide, our ethics board. So we have a representation from all walks of life on this board, and we're very pleased to have it. as Kim said before, and we say every time we talk about the ethics law, we hope never to use it. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do your email thing every now and then just to stay in touch with each other, and to review it and to come up with as different things change. But it's very exciting to have a very, very good ethics law in the town, and it's very exciting that we have a great team behind it, and we'll just tell everyone to behave.
Well, just to add, if I might, to what you just said, this board is so diligent that, or maybe they like each other so much, that there's actually a requirement in the procedures that they've just drafted that regardless of what's going on, they have to meet at least twice a year.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. So I want to thank you again, and I want to thank this board and the previous board that we had for making this a top priority for the last 4 years. It took us a while. We had our dips. We went in, we went out, and thank you, Mark, and thank you, Wayne. Used to be on the ethics board, but thank you for all the work you did, and we're very pleased. So we'll see the results in 2 weeks. I'm not sure if we'll see all you in 2 weeks, but we'll see the results in 2 weeks. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so tonight, now we're going to talk about, to see if anybody has any final questions. Maddie's going to go over a couple of the small changes we made on the budget, and then we'll ask the board if they have any questions. This, again, is a board discussion.
Okay, hello. So I just passed around a short spreadsheet of all of the changes that have been discussed between the supervisor's budget, which we released at the end of October, and in the course of discussions with some of our department heads and among this board, some of the changes that you would like to see in the adopted budget. So the changes are largely in the general fund. We have no changes at all in the highway fund. And the changes in the unincorporated fund should be relatively familiar to you. But I'm going to start at the top for the general fund. We do have 3 new members of the town board coming on in January, so we want to make sure that they're able to attend Association of Towns training. So we wanted to add a little bit of money there, so we have to decide exactly how much, but it's several $100s. It's not substantial. Similarly, in the supervisor's office, we're going to be adding 2 memberships there as well. We had discussed with the receiver of taxes her concerns about including monies for the tax bill payment receipts. So we did add $1,500 for printing and $2,500 for postage. So you can see if you look at the columns all the way on the right-hand side, the recommended column is what was in the October budget that you've all seen. And then the column all the way to the right is what we would propose be in the adopted budget. Continuing to go down the line in the general fund, the health insurance stipend, which is something that we're contractually obligated to give to employees in both of our unions if they opt out of our health insurance. We actually have one employee this year who is going to be taking our health insurance who has not done so up to this point. So we're able to save that money on his stipend, but unfortunately we're going to see it on the other side when we have to pay his health insurance. Does anyone have any questions on that handful before we move on?
Again, I just want to point out that even with the adding the tax receipts on and the tax and the letters and everything, it's still a significant savings over what we paid last year.
Okay. Moving into the unincorporated fund, starting at the top, the file storage. This had been something that we were looking to potentially do a scanning project. We went ahead and moved that money after a concern voiced by Councilwoman Jeffrey. It's $15,400, which we're going to be moving to the workers' comp reserve in addition to the roughly $40,000 that we had already had there. Second line, the SPCA is a contract that we have. It's roughly $11,000 a year. For the first time since I've been here, they've asked for an increase of 5%. So you see a difference of $552 in that line. The next line down is the part-time line in the planning department, which we had some extra there because we were discussing a potential title change. We're going to go ahead and move that $12,800 into the comp reserve as well. Next one down, you see that it's highlighted. This is a line that we have actually never had before because we never had anyone in the building department who's been eligible for the health insurance stipend. So we added that line into the budget today. So whereas the line was never there before, it's now at $1,500. And then finally, the last line there is transfers to workers' comp, which is $28,200. So that's the $15,004 and the $12,008 added together. So you see the difference in that line is substantial as well, which is going to help us out significantly for 2017.
I'm sorry, I missed the planning part. Part-time planning?
Yes.
12 what was this?
We had a request for a title change from one of our employees. Happens to be the person who handles building and planning work. And as the board has seen, we've had a lot of additional work in planning and zoning lately. So that employee was asking for a significant increase. We are looking to do a title change, but not to the degree that had been discussed. So there's a savings in that line there. Okay.
Which was agreed upon, discussed with the department head.
And then finally, the cemetery fund. This is sort of a non-issue in the way that it's not a taxing entity. But even if it were, this is actually it's a wash, basically. So our cemetery superintendent had asked for a little bit of extra money for his seasonal staff. So right now it's the superintendent, and then he has 2 full-timers. So in order to supplement those 2 full-timers, he brings on someone seasonally for a couple of months on and off. So he had asked for some additional time of the seasonal, and then he gave up some money in uniforms and some money in capital improvements. So it's actually a net zero change for his department. And those are all the changes that we're looking at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Great job, Maddie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
Yes.
so much. Does anyone have any other questions?
I don't have any questions about that right now. I actually, and I can wait, but I was reading over the statement from last week, and I had a conversation with Madam Supervisor about this conversation about an insinuation that the mortgage recording tax, which has become this major conversation, that there were insinuations that many communities had asked the state for this, and I couldn't understand where that came from. So I went back to the tapes, and I watched, and I realized what happened. We had a resident who was discussing the mortgage recording tax, and in his statement he said that the unincorporated town is an anomaly, that we are different than almost all other towns in the state of New York, in that our unincorporated town is the smallest populated portion of the entirety of our town. And what he said was that the comptroller has stated that it would be a fix by asking the legislators to do a home rule law, which is done all the time by municipalities. He was not speaking about the mortgage recording tax. He was speaking about the fact that in the state, it is done all the time where specific municipalities ask for home rule allowance to be able to do many things. It could be, there are so many different versions of examples of the things that different municipalities ask for in the state that we couldn't go through them. But the statement was not that.
I think you can answer for yourself saying that, but I don't think you can answer for someone else saying that.
I can answer by saying that I saw and I watched it and I understood.
Well, that's and again, it's your opinion of what he said, too.
It's really not my opinion. He prefaced it by saying we are an anomaly, meaning no one else has done this. I would, and it's also not correct that no community has put a request into the state. We don't know that.
Oh,
No, we don't know that.
You're the one that did the investigation on it.
We
so-
don't. See, once again,
Yeah, you did the
information. Yes, and if you let me finish, specifics matter. We don't know if any other municipality has requested it. What we know is that it has never been a law that has been passed for any municipality. Now, I would go back to we are an anomaly, and we are different than almost all others. So that would be my other statement. The other thing is the conversation just about the amount of percentage and how it, under your example, it would only be or roughly be about $80,000. I would state that for the unincorporated town whose budget is significantly smaller than others, $80,000 makes a difference. It then goes on to talk about the cable franchise fees and how the work that this previous board, I think, did to change that, which we thank you for changing and having the cable franchise fees put back into where it was supposed to be, which is the unincorporated town. I was interested to read your statement where you say, while this left us with a hole in the general fund revenue for the year, we were able to minimize the impact on our taxpayers. And I thought that that was an interesting thing because I feel like it pits to say that the fact that we were provided with revenue that we were supposed to be provided to put a hole in the general fund, I think
we were quite explicit during that budget period of telling people we're moving 144,000, if you remember, and we had to take it out of fund balance. And all we're saying is it left a hole in that budget. We put in fund balance, and we were very diligent getting it done. It doesn't pit anybody against anyone.
I just think it could have been.
This is your opinion.
This is a personal opinion. Okay. I don't think that it had to be worded that way. And I'm going to finish with. I'm going to say it until we have to vote on this budget, which at this point, this 35% of 4 individuals, which is arbitrary to me and is being put onto the unincorporated town, I do not believe is fair and equitable. I believe that we, throughout history in the unincorporated town, have not been provided with funds that we should, and sometimes that's legal, but it's not right. I think we've been overcharged many ways, many times for many years. And I'm not saying that this board or the previous board didn't work to try to change things. I'm saying historically that's how it's been. And so I think that we have very much subsidized very often other funds and that it is not fair or equitable. I think that when we start getting into an issue of who does how much work percentage-wise where, it becomes complicated and difficult and not necessarily fair and equitable. And I don't know that how it could be true that every single other community, and it says that in here, that every single other community in the state of New York, I would find it interesting to be able to make a blanket statement like that. But for this community, in this time, where this board is supposed to be the governing board for the unincorporated town, to be the advocates for the unincorporated town, to do the right things for the unincorporated town, because this is the sole board for that place, I think that this is not the right thing, and it's not fair and equitable.
Councilwoman Jeffrey, we're all individual board members, and thankfully that's what allows us to have sometimes intelligent discussion in which we agree or disagree. And collectively, hopefully we reach consensus and find ways to enhance the lives of our taxpayers. But I don't think your comments here are constructive. I think they're critical of the board on which you sit. I think they're unnecessary. I haven't heard any constructive solution offered by you to any of the points that you've made. So I'm just curious if 35% is inequitable, for one example. What is equitable to you? Because I'm sure you acknowledge that these individuals do provide services that specifically are for the benefit of unincorporated residents only. So what is equitable in your opinion?
I think it's a large picture.
I'd like a number, please.
0.
Okay. That to me is not equitable because what I think the effort.
It's a large question. It's not a simple, 0, but
Well,
there's a big reasoning behind it. I've said it before. I don't have to go through it again, but it is, we already subsidize the village and the general town fund in many other ways.
In what way? Come up with a specific example. Tell me what your suggestion is. Allow the board to review it, consider it, and give you feedback. But you've never, as far as
I have.
as far as I've understood, never on any critical matter, and by critical, I don't mean that it's an important matter, I mean a matter in which you criticize. Have I ever heard you come up with a constructive solution? So if you're going to sit here and criticize this board and this budget
Yeah.
on specifics, and you just said specifics matter, I'd like some specifics.
Okay,
What are your suggestions?
My-
Because
My suggestion is until our water bill is lowered, until we get our mortgage recording tax that we should be getting, and this board passes a resolution asking the legislation to do that, until we start looking at every single employee that works for the town general and the unincorporated and start figuring out how much time every single body does for exactly which fund line, then until we do any of those things, that this 35% for these particular arbitrary people to
It's not arbitrary
Well,
at
But they're
all.
not
Again,
arbitrary. They do
Okay.
work for the town.
for
No, they
these
actually are the administration
so
of the town.
these until all
again-
other things are equitable with the fact that we are often paying more or not paying the things we should be, to me,
You're not paying the things it should
you're,
be.
You're asking me my answer. That's my answer.
right.
Okay.
And
So
I wouldn't be by myself
Right.
because there are many people who have this same consideration with respect to the fact that there is an insensitivity in general about the things that this unincorporated town does, what we pay, how often we paid historically.
Okay, I have
That-
not heard any
so-
specifics yet, so when you come up with some
It is a
specifics, I'd be
specific.
interested
The
to hear them.
specific-
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I've come up with the specific.
Okay, what's your
I-
specific plan?
My specific plan is that these four people shouldn't be moved at 35% because it's historically never been done. To me, it is not equitable. To the people who live in the unincorporated town, many of them don't think it's equitable, and I think you shouldn't do it. That's it. That's the specific.
Okay, so that's, that, you're not going to get anywhere because we're going to go around in circles
But
with this.
no, I'd like to point out, though, it's my understanding that these individuals
Mm-hmm.
do provide services that are exclusively for the benefit of
Absolutely.
town outside residents. Therefore, in my opinion, and it's just one of 5 on this board, in my opinion, there should be some allocation of fund allocation to pay for those services.
Okay, so
Okay?
then.
So that if you're not, and your specific tonight, if I got it correctly, was 0.
Okay,
to me,
so, okay,
to me,
wait.
No.
No,
I'm
wait,
in-
wait,
I'm
excuse
in the
me,
middle of a
Kim,
thought.
he's
Okay,
talking
well,
now.
So to me, that's not equitable.
Oh, and
It's-
I'm going
it's-
to give you something
It's
then.
inequitable and it's improper.
It's not.
And this is an effort by the board
Mm-hmm.
to create some equity where none exists now. And in future budgets, there will be an opportunity for future boards to take a look at the 35% and tweak it, reduce it, increase it, whatever the board determines. But 0, Councilwoman Jeffrey, 0 it's wholly inappropriate when you are the one who's saying it should be equitable.
Okay, so.
0 money for
so
services
when
rendered
the
is not equitable.
When the highway department, who works for the unincorporated town, goes and does work for Dale Cemetery, which is general, they don't get paid for that. When the highway department goes and does work and helps the parks department, which is town general, they don't get paid for that. We don't get reimbursement from the general. Now, we can go back and forth because we have departments that help each other who are in different fund lines. There's no payment back and forth. My statement is that we can it's replete with personnel who work on different sides of these two issues. And we don't go and start divvying it up because at the end of the day, these positions are for, generally, the betterment of the town general. And so to me, that is why it's equitable that they were under the town general. And that alone is why, and you start getting into who's doing what and what percentage, it becomes arbitrary because
Okay.
now we're not doing,
But you've
we're
offered
not,
no specifics
Okay,
whatsoever.
so this could go back and forth. I'm going to make one statement. This is administrators who do specific duties for the unincorporated budget because we are the local government for the unincorporated budget. It is lawyers that do only work in the planning, for the planning board and the planners and all other different things just for the unincorporated area. So it is not when you take a highway guy and work him in parks for a day, and then the parks guys reciprocate because they have such a good team. This is specific duties. We laid them out on the line. You don't like it, that's fine. We're going to move on from here. Do you have anything else on the budget that you wanted to talk about? Do you have anything? Yes, sir.
I do, but good.
Well, let her finish if she's got, you just said no.
No,
so-
no, go ahead.
No.
Councilwoman Jeffrey, you also indicated that that there were questions about inequitability of water. I agree with that. In fact, it was my idea to take a closer look at that, and I don't recall you having brought that up as an issue on your own. But I do appreciate you acknowledging that that was an issue that I had brought up as something that demands closer attention for better equitable treatment of
We've had
of
lots
the-
of
of the
conversations
town outside.
amongst ourselves. That's
Okay.
untrue.
And then-
We've discussed that amongst ourselves. The fact is, you're part of the IMA committee, and so you brought that up in connection with the IMA, not necessarily in connection with, anything else. And we've talked about that before. So
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you for that. Also, you also mentioned that there was, you said you watched the tapes the other day.
and I watched it today.
Okay, so you watched the tapes today. Did you hear yourself say on the tape that this board declined your request to write to the state for home rule legislation?
I did.
Okay. At what time did you ever ask me?
I like the
And did I
lawyerly
decline?
cross-examination
And-
tone.
Well, you said
you do it
specifics.
you do it too.
You said specifics matter, so
Okay.
I'm calling you out on your own words. You said this board declined your request to write to the state for home rule legislation.
Yes.
What proposal did you make? What letter did you write?
Yes.
And what resolution did you propose that this board declined?
Okay, so we had a meeting where I presented, I don't have an exact date. I would say it was March or April of this year. I think that's correct. I
Was
mean,
it by
you-
email with a
No,
proposal?
no, I had a presentation. It's
Okay.
on the agenda.
Okay.
We had
No,
it.
you brought it up, and you never
So-
brought in the presentation, but that's another whole issue. And we're not going to go there. 'cause
No,
this is
no,
gonna
no,
get-
we are gonna go there. And you asked a question, I have
I
an
do.
answer.
I'd like the answer.
So it was on an agenda, on a work meeting, and we could go back to find out
We will.
when that was. And I presented the information exactly what we had, which was that it's legal,
Okay.
that it's being done correctly, there's never been that, and that this is why there was a discussion and why I felt that it should be changed. And the answer to doing that was for this board to
Right.
pass a resolution to ask the legislators to give us home rule.
Okay. What was the response
When-
from the board?
There was no response at the time. It was a work agenda, and I did follow up with an email, and I'm sure I could find it, where I asked for us to do it, and Madam Supervisor said we would not be doing it at that time. And that was an email that went from her. All of us were on it, and so that was the denial to take it up. Nobody else on this board sent an email back and said, "Well, I disagree. We should go ahead and do it."
Okay.
I'm not going to get into.
I'd be interested to see that exchange.
So anyway.
It's not my memory.
So
I
anyway,
will
do you have any specific budget questions? Any more specific budget questions?
I will say a general thing. I note that there are changes to the personnel too. There's a lowering of the salary for the town attorney. There is a change in the salary for the deputy town attorney, which I thought was interesting because both of those positions had an increase last year. I see that the confidential secretary has gone from a full-time to a part-time, which was a position that I was never for, and I'm sorry to Maddie because I know that upsets her because she needs assistance, but I was never for the fact that we were going to have that position. And then I noted that the receiver of taxes and the superintendent of highways salaries have gone up. And I just have an overall statement that I find this twinkling with salaries and what they are and what they aren't and up and down from year to year. I just don't find that to be the right way to budget. I don't think that that's fair to go after people's salaries, and it may not be because they did something wrong. I understand that there's budgets, but I just think that putting it in, taking it out, and moving it around is not fair to people. I just think that that's also, I'm not.
Well, again,
particularly fond of
that's
that.
more of a personnel issue, and it's something that we don't really discuss. The fact that part of this commitment to this board was to bring the highway superintendent and the tax receiver salaries back up to their positions, whether it is we made a commitment, we did what we said we were going to do. We tried the confidential secretary for 1 year. We felt we could do it with a 3-day a week. Again, there's a new supervisor coming in. She can make her decisions on that. Every single department sacrificed this year. This is a very tight budget, especially in the town general. It is extremely tight. You have to stay in the tax cap. You have certain restrictions. You can have a choice. You can either make some choices that might lower someone's salary and keep your staff in place, or you can start laying people off. And that's exactly where you are on
I
this.
don't think that those are the only two options. You put a lot of money away in reserve for the.
That's in the unincorporated. That is not in the town general. There is no money in the town general. There never is any money, and it's the tightest budget that you work on. So take your budget, look at it again, and if you have any other questions, make sure you're in the right fund. Yes, sir.
I'm always amazed at the intricacies in any budget review, and you can all shoot me, but I need to applaud the efforts of our budget director, Madeline Zashaz, and Tom and Dale and Sue. This is, for anybody that watches this, the tight budget, the numbers, I mean, it's just phenomenal to look and see how this finished product comes out. It's really, I just have to applaud the very hard work that goes into this. Nothing is easy that goes on in municipal governance, but maybe nothing is more challenging than the budget. So thank you very much. It's a great piece of work.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to thank all the people that that wrote and called. As I said before, we're still getting some calls in. People are looking at it. We're very transparent. We're more transparent than just about any other government that I can think of. And we post everything on the webpage, and we talk about everything. So with that, I think that's with our final discussions. Next Tuesday, we will vote on the budget, and everyone should vote with their conscience as to how they think the budget should go. It is tight. It is under the cap. It is hard to do that when you have contractual and insurance increases all over the place. So with that, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We don't have an executive session. Okay, so we're not going to do executive session tonight, which is very good. And I want to ask you three to stay for a second, and then so we'll see you next Tuesday for our legislative meeting. Please come to the tree lighting at Harbor Square, at Market Square this Friday night. It starts around 5:30, and Santa will be coming soon at 6:15. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful week.